everyone, welcome back to another NAU social series.
I'm Maria Takeover, NAU Social Media Manager.
And I'm Mackenzie McLaughlin, NAU Social Media Coordinator.
And happy October. This is one of our favorite times of the year. You know, we have fall, the leaves changing colors, homecoming, and
lots of time for students to take over those accounts, whether it be your Instagram, your Snapchat. So today we're going to talk all about how to facilitate a Lumberjack takeover.
follow along for the do's and don'ts.
Our biggest recommendation for facilitating Lumberjack takeovers is a lot of planning.
So one of the first things we recommend to do is to create a Google Doc. You know, think about all the information you want to capture, because that's your chance to get all the information. You know, like contact information, screen handles, kind of just like idea storming. If you don't get it that first time, you probably won't get it. So the much you can capture the first time,
the better.
Yes.
For sure. We also recommend keeping a calendar with potential takeover dates with backups as well, because as we all know, sometimes things change in students' schedules and students' lives, and so you don't want to plan your whole week around that specific takeover and then have it fall through and have nothing to fall back on.
And so another lesson that we've learned when we've been coordinating is we try to plan as far in advance as we can. But when we talk about communicating with students, we wait till at least a week before. Sometimes 2 is cutting it, just because they're going to forget about it. So we always just plan ahead, but then don't tell them till closer to the date.
And don't be afraid to do a social media sweep before selecting your student, because you want to make sure if they put their handle at the bottom of your Instagram account screen or your Snapchat screen and somebody links out to that, they're not going to find things that don't reflect well on NAU or that student who's doing the takeover. So always make sure you're checking out their social media first.
So another thing you want to do is you need to create guidelines. Create a takeover guideline for your area. So when you give your account over, you don't just want the student to be like, well, what do I do? You want to give them something that they can follow. So whether it's like a list of things you want them to see, do you want them to start off in the same format as your other takeovers do, or do you want to give them creative freedom? You know, include that. Include when you want them to start, how long they have takeover. Just include as much, so then it could help them prepare and get their ideas going, and then they could follow through with you and grow from there.
And it's super important to let them know whether or not they could do a Q&A. Like, are they allowed to answer questions from your account, or would you prefer they rather not? It sort of depends. I think especially, like, let's say if financial aid was doing a takeover and you're not super confident your student knows all the answers to that, it would be important to know whether or not that's allowed for them to facilitate that answer. We also recommend not forgetting to ask for an outline for what the student plans to highlight. So having them sort of think through, like, okay, well, I start my day with breakfast, always at Starbucks at this time, you know, and kind of writing out the steps that they're going to take during their takeover, just so you have an idea and they also feel comfortable facilitating their whole plan for that day.
And then also you can see what they're doing and add them to add more for certain areas.
So the next phase, obviously, is the facilitation of that Lumberjack takeover. And one of the most common questions we get is, do you really share your password with students? Not necessarily.
So here's a trick that we do to make sure we feel confident in the content we get and working with students. So we create a test account, also known as our takeover account. And so that way, whenever we do a takeover, that is the account that we'll give to people. So then they could just like take it over, they do their story, and then the magic part is it all saves. So if they post live, it'll save to your archives. So then you can use that content and just download it and then save and post later at the time that works for you.
So that's one of our backup tricks if you're not super comfortable with giving out your password. Another one of our do's is to promote and announce that the takeover is happening on your account. Whether that be like on Monday, hey, tune in on Thursday for a day in the life takeover, or if just that morning you post a little frame that says Lumberjack takeover. But it's important to let your followers know what is happening on your account. I remember one time somebody texted us, you guys got hacked, and it was like, no, that was just a Lumberjack takeover that started before our frame started. So it's important to let your followers know what to expect on your account that day.
And there's great ways to remind them, especially with Instagram story. They have the notification and the countdown sticker, so you can add that up, and then when the takeover happens, it'll pop back up on those people's screens and they'll log on.
And don't be afraid to share login information. Remember, you've gone through multiple communication cycles with them, so you know that they're consistent, they're reliable. You've also hopefully swept their social media, so you know what's going on. But our pro tip is to use two-factor authentication.
It can be scary at first and intimidating. You're like, you get nervous when you press send, but especially like when we do Snapchat takeovers, I feel totally confident because we need to send that person a code to get in. So even if they have our information, they can't get in without that authentication code that comes from us. So when you know what time they're going to start and what time they're going to text you for the login information, then you know that that person is like the legit person doing the takeover.
Lastly, always make sure you're monitoring the takeover. You want to be available to delete in case of an emergency because you never know what can happen. And also, it's important to be available to your student who's taking over if they're having Wi-Fi issues or they get questions they don't know how to answer. It's important that they have the ability to connect with you need be.
And so now that the takeover has happened, what do you do with it? Save all your content and look at the data you get. So whenever you have a takeover, not only just like save the content to the archives, but save it to your computer so then you could use it for other purposes as well.
And don't be afraid to share it with us. On Insta Story, you can create a highlight, make the story evergreen. You can send us the content, and we might be able to repurpose it or use it someday. So try to squeak out as much as you can from each of those takeovers, especially ones that are really strong, ones that really highlight whatever it is that you're hoping to highlight, that really meet your mission and goals for your own social media account.
And again, just swipe up and look at the detailed information. There's great things to see, like how many people was your open rate. Do you find that when you do takeovers, your open rate is higher or there's more completions because people watch it, or they, maybe it's not as high, but they watch it more times. Look at things like that. And then also how many questions did you get, how many DMs. So there's just lots of ways to see how people are engaging with your content and what you can do from there.
And how to structure your future takeovers, right? You can reflect on the challenges and the successes and kind of adapt from there.
As always, feel free to contact us and don't forget to tag us in your posts.
And we also will be having our next Social Media 101 class on October 9th, and you can register for that on Louie. And then our next social media office hours will be on November 20th. So look out for that link in our newsletter.
Come hang out with us.
Yay!